I'll tell the story. Maybe even write a book about my many phobias. But until then, I'll tell you a few of them. I'm scared of the dark, so I sleep with the lights on. Forget that I'm 39 and getting married next year. I'm scared of water, so I don't swim, which is embarrassing for someone from the Niger Delta region. I'm scared of cats. Apologies to cat lovers, but every time I see one, I hear my mother's voice in my head saying something like, "Never look a cat in the eye. It will spit on you and you'll go blind." I'm scared of being stuck in traffic. Every time that happens, I feel like the rest of the world is on the move and I'm just stuck in that one spot going nowhere. At other times I'm in traffic, my mind starts to wander and I have ugly thoughts, like a suicide bomber appearing from nowhere and there's no place to take cover because my car is sandwiched between two large trucks or something like that. At other times I'm in traffic, I imagine a robbery attack and the robbers having a field day because in the midst of all the chaos going on and the rapid gunfire, it's impossible to shelter in place in an open vehicle that is right there in the middle of all the action. These are my phobias. I've said some because there's more. The sound of thunder, chopping things with a sharp knife, masquerades and cockroaches of any size, and I haven't even mentioned the biggest of them all, flying. I have a phobia for flying. Experts in behavioral science and people who study and name such things call it aviophobia or theromophobia. The name doesn't really matter. It's the way the fear consumes me and makes me act crazy. That's the real problem. The few times I've flown and the reason I vowed never to fly again was because every single time panic sets in days before I'm scheduled to travel, and then on the eve of my departure, I don't even sleep a wink. That thing in the body that makes people anxious and afraid gets activated long before I arrive at the airport. And in the plane, I experience a near fatal panic attack that affects my breathing, so much so that it takes the combined efforts of the entire cabin crew and other passengers on board to calm me down. Knowing this about myself, I had to stop flying. But the demands of life and my job meant that traveling was inevitable. I might have boycotted airplanes and airports completely, but that didn't translate to an outright travel ban for me. So, in order to move from one part of Nigeria to another in a timely fashion, I had to devise a reasonably priced yet comfortable means of traveling. I chose road travel. But in doing so, I had to face another fear. I know I didn't mention it earlier, but I also have a phobia for crowded places and cramped vehicles. It was the reason I ditched the popular 14-seater commercial buses or even the ubiquitous Toyota Sienna family cars that carried between 6 to 7 passengers depending on the whim of the driver or the operators of the transport company involved. Prioritizing comfort, the logic of saving cost was thrown out of the window when I lost the courage to fly. My preference was to travel solo, so I opted for a chartered vehicle with just me and the driver whenever I was visiting my fiancée in Lagos or attending a work-related program or meeting outside Port Harcourt. This one, I say next, isn't exactly a phobia, it's more of a habit. I get addicted to places and people quite easily, and I have instances to prove this. In the last 8 years, it has been the same place I go to have a haircut or shave my beards. I've only ever had one mechanic for my cars since I discovered this guy in Ikoku. My friends think he has programmed for parts of my car to malfunction whenever I get paid my salary, but I don't believe them. I mean, isn't that why there's such a word as coincidence in the dictionary? Every Saturday morning since I moved out of my parents' house, I must eat boiled yam and scrambled eggs. And if my etibos aren't made by this one tailor in Ilabuchi that has made clothes for the men in my family for as long as I can remember, I'm not wearing them. When it comes to my trips, I can only patronize one man, Oga Desmond. Oga Desmond started driving me 4 or 5 years ago, I think. He was recommended to me by my sister, Jumba, and her husband, Benibo. Both avid travel bloggers and videographers. They were constantly on the move, discovering, exploring, and recommending exciting new holiday destinations to subscribers of their popular YouTube series, The Restless Lives of June and Ben. Oga Desmond had been the driver one time their restlessness took them on an adventure to a tourist site in Kogi State. They liked him, he liked them, so he became their first choice tour guide whenever they shot something new. Oga Desmond knew that I liked traveling alone, so I was kind of surprised when he called me around 4 p.m. yesterday to make a request. I thought this particular request was uncharacteristic of him. He took me to Lagos on Friday morning. I was the only one in the car with him. The plan was for him to take me back home on Monday morning, with me being his only passenger as usual. That's how it had always been. Why did he want to change things all of a sudden? You see, I was in Lagos for the weekend to propose to my girlfriend of 2.5 years, Kambili. At this point, I'm tempted to digress and talk about how that went, but I'll control myself and maybe talk about it some other time. Anyway, back to my story. Desmond calls me. I and my wife to be chilling in our house. He wants me to help him help one of his regular customers who was also in Lagos but had to be in Port Harcourt the next day as well. At first, I was hesitant, but he explained to me that this person he wanted me to assist was elderly and very respectable. He told me he had known her and her husband for many years, and just like me, she had a phobia for flying and would only travel by land. Again, like me, even with the whole land thing, he said she has serious trust issues and would only embark on a road trip if he was the one taking her. Oga Desmond begged and begged. He said she had a family emergency or something to that effect. He said I had nothing to fear because she was a good person and he could vouch for her. What swayed me, however, was money. When Oga Desmond told me that she was willing to bear the cost of the charter and that I didn't have to pay anything, I gave in immediately. For this Buhari economy, who don't like money? Anyway, back to my story. At 4:30 sharp, my phone rang. Good morning, Oga Fire. I dey your gate, oh. I kissed Kambili, grabbed my bag, and headed out to join Oga Desmond. We drove in silence from Adeniro Ogunsanya in Surulere to Ozumba Mbadiwe in Victoria Island. Oga Desmond had told me the passenger was on the island. He didn't tell me she was staying at the Radisson Blu Hotel. I was impressed. Maybe even a tad bit intimidated at this point. At exactly 5 o'clock, she walks out through the door of the hotel. In her 60s, possibly even 70s, the woman was tall and elegantly dressed. Her flowing ankle-length gown was colorful yet simple. The different shades of yellow and brown splattered on the Ankara fabric of her dress accentuated her dark skin. She screamed class from afar, and I thought to myself, she'd be perfect in the role of a rich wife and mother in a Nollywood movie. But as she came closer to where Oga Desmond and I were parked, I noticed the bags underneath her eyes and that her smile was forced. I also noticed something else. She wasn't alone. There was another woman about her height walking beside her. I believe the reason I missed that earlier in spite of this person's height was because she was dressed from head to toe in a black burqa or at least something that looked like one. I glanced at Desmond as if to say, what's the meaning of this? I noticed him trying hard not to look at me, and I'm infuriated, maybe even afraid. Would I be traveling from Lagos to Port Harcourt with someone whose face I can't see? Who is this person dressed like this? What if they were? No. I told myself not to think it. I may not be a praying man, but I know my parents are, and they pray for me all the time. Besides, I trusted Oga Desmond not to put me in harm's way. We had become family. I met his wife and 7 kids. He was at my engagement party on Saturday. There was no way he'd be part of a ploy to kidnap or kill me. Maybe to avoid addressing my unspoken fears, Oga Desmond left the car to help the two women with their luggage while they settled in behind me. "Good morning, my son." "Good morning, ma." "Thank you, oh. Thank you for allowing us inconvenience you small. Oga Desmond told us that you like traveling alone." "We thank God, ma." "I am Mrs. Afenfia, by the way." She introduced herself, but the person in the burqa didn't. "And you, what is your name and what do you do for a living?" "My name is Fayofori Jaja and I'm a doctor." "A psychiatrist, actually." "Wow, you're already a doctor at such a young age? Your parents must be very proud of you. You know, I always used to wonder how you people make your patients tell you their problems and all the things they have bottled for years. I always tell couples in my church that there's nothing wrong with counseling and therapy and seeking professional help if their marriage isn't working. I'm not as young as I look. And second, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist. I'm a psychiatrist, people. There's a difference. Of course, I didn't tell her any of those things. I was just thinking them. Her comments weren't strange. People said that to me all the time. Besides, Kambile and I were texting. She wanted to find out if I was safe and if I felt comfortable traveling with strangers. I texted back that they looked harmless. At least the one whose face I could see appeared so. I heard the book click and Oga Desmond got back into the car. He was going to restart the engine, but Madam Afenfia stopped him. She said, "We should pray first." She began with a chorus. It was a song about the blood of Jesus my mother used to sing around the house when we were kids. She sang it in almost every morning devotion, and when there was a problem in the family that required God's intervention, my father sang it too. After the solo rendition from Mrs. Afenfia, she proceeded to pray for the driver and those of us riding with him. She sprinkled blood on all of us and parts of the vehicle that didn't have any business being wet. All I could think of while she prayed were the disastrous things that could happen to us if blood and petrol suddenly got mixed together in the car engine, or if we truly became invincible to other drivers on the road like she asked God for. After 8 minutes, I was counting, Oga Desmond and I chorused, "Amen, oh," and our journey began. I thought I'll stay awake all through, but I fell asleep even before we got to Ojota. When I woke up, it was bright and the sun was out. I looked behind and saw the two women in the back seat fast asleep. I brought out my copy of The Days of Silence by Angel Patrick Amagbe and began reading. I was in chapter 7 of the book when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Mrs. Afenfia. "Doctor, do you know where we are now?" "I think we're almost at Ore." "Thank you, my son. So, where are you from?" I didn't ask the other time. "I'm from River State, Opobo." "Oh, okay." I returned to my novel, but this time I couldn't concentrate on what I was reading. Mrs. Afenfia was on her phone. She spoke in a language she thought I wouldn't understand because I told her I was from Opobo. If only she knew my mother was Calabar and that I could understand everything she was saying to the person on the other end of the phone. I don't think she'd have kept on with the conversation about her daughter, Eka, and what was going on in her life. It was a lot, but I'll summarize. Her daughter had married this guy she began dating when she was in the university. At the time, he was a struggling record producer known only in Port Harcourt. After her graduation from the university, she auditioned for Big Brother Africa and was selected to represent Nigeria at the show in South Africa. She didn't win, but the platform gave her access to rich and famous people. Eka had become a celebrity with a fan base of loyal women and men rooting for her success in the country's entertainment industry. Eka had become a big girl, yet her newly found fame and celebrity status didn't change her feelings for her boyfriend. She loved him with all her heart, and every time people offered to do something nice for her or give her an opportunity in the industry, she'll tag him along. Through her connections, he got his first big break producing 3 songs for Olamide, 2 for the P-Square Brothers, and 1 for Two-Face Idibia within the space of 6 months. 2 years after she appeared on the show, through her connections, he got his first big break producing 3 songs for Olamide, 2 for the P-Square Brothers, and 1 for Two-Face Idibia within the space of 6 months. 2 years after she appeared on the show in South Africa, and 1 year after the Nigerian music scene took notice of her boyfriend, the two of them tied the knot in a small ceremony. His thinking was that if people knew she was married so soon after the show, they might not want to associate with her as freely as they used to, or invite her to places only single ladies were wanted. Before long, her husband was spotted by recording companies abroad, and he began producing songs for A-list international acts. He traveled all over the world, writing songs and making music that went gold and platinum in record time. When pictures of him in the company of light-skinned women began surfacing online, Eka bleached her skin because she thought it was what he wanted. When he progressed to hanging out with voluptuous women, she had her body done in the hopes that being covetous for him would bring her superstar husband home and rekindle his attraction for her, but it didn't seem to please him. Eka's confidence was gone and she wanted her husband back. He loved their children and he said he loved her too, but by cheating on her publicly, he was being disrespectful. Privately, things weren't any better. He was a horrible husband who treated her badly. What was worse was him forgetting that if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't even have been the superstar he was. His career would have gone nowhere had she not sacrificed hers for his. She became a stay-at-home mom so he could freely mingle and go anywhere his skills were needed. Eka felt she had invested too much in him and in their marriage to give it all up. She thought losing him meant she had lost herself, and it drove her to desperation. She thought she knew her husband. She thought she knew what he wanted, and she was ready to give it to him. Because she knew who his celebrity crush was, Eka decided to use that information to her advantage. Long before he became rich and famous, long before he became the hotshot music producer sought after by the best of the best, he had told her one night, he was quite tipsy, that if he ever became successful and he met this person, there was nothing he wouldn't do to spend at least one night with her. Eka never forgot that night. She never forgot her name or her face. She traveled to Turkey without telling anyone. When she came back, her face was gone. She had become this person her husband fantasized about. Mrs. Afenfia's story made me angry and sad at the same time, because when her son-in-law saw his wife's face, it made him really mad. So mad he hit her, and it wouldn't be the first time. Mrs. Afenfia's trip to Lagos was to report him to the police and take her daughter back with her to Port Harcourt. He still has the children, she concluded to the person she was talking to on the phone, but it wouldn't be for long. We arrived Port Harcourt around 2 in the afternoon. Oga Desmond decided to drop me off first since I live in Rumubekwe, and Mrs. Afenfia and the woman in the Boka, who was silent all through the journey, were going to New GRA. I grabbed my bag from the boot of the car and said my goodbyes to the driver and his 2 passengers. Few minutes after I got home, I was contemplating whether or not to take a shower before making lunch. I had the doorbell ring. I went to get it, wondering who it could be since I hadn't called any of my friends to let them know I was back. Hi, it was Boka lady, and she could speak. Hi, you forgot your novel. My mother insisted that we brought it back immediately the driver noticed. Thank you, I said sheepishly. Thank you too. It was really kind of you allowing us join a vehicle you had hired for yourself, she said, taking off her veil. My jaw dropped. My jaw dropped to the ground. She was... If I didn't know better, I would have sworn she was Rita Dominic. And the moral of this story, if there's one, is that you should never see your beautiful through someone else's eyes. Be your own beautiful.